All right, we are back. No Name Cinema Society. Keep you been doing this this is our 18th time. We've been doing it since February. It's crazy to me. So it's time for our Indie Spotlight. Hi, I'm Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts for the evening. And as part of the Indie Spotlights, we went through a lot of 2014 indies. These are Indie Spotlights that at least one of us are going to recommend. And so Davie made the rule that we can only do movies within a 5-year period. So we're going to exhaust our 2010 indies. Last time we talked about the indie Rabbit Hole, which incidentally was my #1 film of 2010. Tonight we're going to talk about a film called The Joneses, which I am recommending. And this beer that I'm drinking tonight is specifically chosen because it's featured in the Joneses, and that I'll explain that in just a second. J Money's also drinking beer. He's one of my partners here today. J Money, how are you today?
I'm good. By the way, I should say Happy Halloween, even though it's not technically Halloween yet. Happy Halloween.
You okay? Cool. Cool. You're doing that now. Very good. And what about you, Davie Joe? How are you?
Doing great.
Cool. Now, those of you that have been watching our trivia contest, questions, etc., may be wondering what the answer was. Well, you know that the film is The Joneses, but it comes from the producer of the film called Christy Zay. Christy Zay, the trivia question was, what person also has the rare distinction of getting Oscar nominated for being both a production designer and a producer? Because there's two jobs that don't normally go hand in hand. Christy Zay was a production designer for many years for films such as Goodfellas and things of that nature, but then segued to being a producer. She was nominated in the Best Picture category as a producer of As Good as It Gets in 1997, and then was later nominated in the production design category for Revolutionary Road in 2008. So she has that rare distinction. She actually served both functions on this film, The Joneses. So that's kind of interesting. It's rare to do both. So that was the answer to a trivia question, and that's where that came from. We don't like to make the trivia questions too easy. What do you guys think of Christy Zay over there?
She's fantastic.
Goodfellas, though.
I enjoy Goodfellas.
Do you enjoy the production design of Goodfellas?
Yeah. You know what? Yes, I did. I guess I really hadn't considered it as strongly until just now when you actually brought it up. But yes.
Hey, Joe, can you give me something more interesting than that on Christy Zay? It's a pretty amazing accomplishment.
Well, I don't really know Christy Zay personally.
I mean, Davie Joe, can you give me something on Christy Zay?
I mean, Goodfellas is a heck of a film, man.
All right, these guys are useless right now. Indie Spotlight. It's The Joneses. So, anyway, The Joneses is about a seemingly perfect family, which is really a collection of salespeople and actors who try to entice their friends and neighbors into buying the latest and greatest things on the market, sort of a stealth marketing family. And the film sort of details what they go through and the problems that arise from that scenario. Now, as I said, Rabbit Hole, which we talked about last time, was my #1 film of 2010 in my top 10. The Joneses was my #5 film of that year when I first made the list. Now, I hadn't seen it since, so I was a little nervous about it, about rewatching it, and because I thought, well, maybe it wouldn't hold up as much. I wasn't sure, but I was not disappointed. In recommending it, I was reminded that it was a sharply written satire and a dark comedy that is a satire on consumerism and materialism, and I think with a lot of heart, actually. So it was very exciting to rewatch this film again, and I think it's a lot of people missed the boat. I bet these guys missed the boat as well, but I think a lot of people will miss the boat on this, and I'm here to defend it for you all. Davie, J Money, you went first last time, so let's go with Davie Joe and his opening thoughts.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry, J Money and his opening thoughts.
What?
Sorry.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, I get you guys confused.
They all look the same.
Sorry.
I understand how it is. Did I miss the boat on this? I think that we're just in entirely different, maybe regions of the country. I don't think there was a boat for me to miss on this one. It's okay. It was a okay movie. I don't really feel too enamored with it, but I also don't think it was bad. I think that I would question that it was a strong satire. I think I would question that it was a sharp script. But it's charming in its own way, certainly. And I certainly enjoyed the some of the performances that we saw. I enjoyed Duchovny and Demi more. I'll throw it over to Dave.
I mean, like, I obviously agree with the second part of that. Davey Joe, what do you think?
No, I liked it a lot. I was wondering though when I watched this movie if it was going to be a little too heavy-handed for you. It doesn't usually bother me as much. I mean, I don't mind.
How so do you think? What do you think was heavy-handed about it?
I think it was
pretty. You had something to say? You want to interrupt?
I think it was pretty. I think it was pretty dramatic that the guy. I mean, this is.
You talking about the tragedy moment at the end?
Yes, the tragedy
okay.
was. I mean, it was definitely at the beginning of that scene. You're like, oh, I know what happened, but I mean that they definitely took it to an extreme, I believe.
I mean, I wanted to. That was sort of on the. I mean, like, I have a list of things that that are nitpicky, and that's on it.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, like, I do think it's sort of a nitpicky thing. I mean, like, that's the one thing in the film, if I were the director, I probably would have handled differently. With that said, I think it creates, there's a great couple images that come from that. And it's one of the few moments that the movie's not entirely, that the movie's cinematic. Because it's actually, I think it's script-driven, it's screenplay-driven, and it's the individual scenes and dialogue and chemistry that drives the film. But it lacks a certain cinematicness, a certain visual quality. And that's the one scene that has it, I think. So that, to me, I mean, like, I am on the fence about it, but it did not strike me. It did not feel as heavy-handed as some of the moments in Bridge of Spies for some reason. I mean, like, it certainly had me on the fence, but and it happened late enough in the film that I think I was engaged enough, for me, that to let it go. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the aftermath was also worked pretty well. It's just the execution of it, and like, if we tried to break down, like, we don't want to give too much away, but for those of you that have seen it, the actual execution of it, like, if we really thought about it, we would wonder about how possible it even was to accomplish. Like, it might be possible, but not, like, it'd be challenging for whoever to do this tragic thing that they did. So, what I think they're going for is a great image, and they got it. So I'm on the fence about that moment. I don't feel like it's as heavy-handed as Bridge of Spies, for example.
Interesting. I mean, it's almost like I feel like we're watching two different movies in some ways. I would not. Well, just stepping back for a second, I don't feel like it was a very strong satire. I don't feel like it really had teeth to what it was trying to say. And I really don't feel like it had a dark edge to it. I actually thought it was a very successful romantic comedy. I feel like that was really what the movie kind of ended up becoming, whether or not I wanted to. And perhaps that's because I think it couldn't really figure out what exactly it did want to be. But ultimately, there was a point where I had thought, at the beginning of this movie, that I thought I knew what the tone of it was going to be, and that changed dramatically throughout the entire performance, throughout the entire movie itself. So I guess that's why I'm having. I think that's where we disagree about this, JB, is that I didn't find it to be successful satire at all, actually. I thought it was an interesting premise that could have been a successful satire, but to me it felt like the filmmakers decided to go in a different direction with it. Now,
I mean, like, in order to be a successful satire, do you think they should have de-emphasized the love story altogether? Is that how they would have accomplished that? Because, I mean, by giving screen time to that relationship, does that negate, like, the sort of, like, the suggestion of the nature of consumerism? Like, I think it's all there in the concept, and I think.
Well, no, I think that ultimately that conversation about consumerism ends up becoming a backdrop to the romance. It's not that they have to negate the romance; it's that the movie ends up being about the romance. Ultimately, it ends up being that is the driving force, and that's what the resolution's about. And I think that
you don't think that this sort of, like, the suggestion of the dangers of consumerism and materialism, like, you don't. I mean, like, I feel like that's a big part of it. Otherwise, the tragic event wouldn't be.
I feel like they were barely shown, and I feel like the way that they handled that scene that we're talking about was so shoehorned in there because they were lacking anything else to show for it. To me,
there was other bad things that happened with the teenagers and
very light stuff. I mean, I guess I felt like it really was not successful in terms of talking about consumerism. It was successful in terms of talking about people that were sort of put into a weird situation that had to rectify that with their own problems. Because ultimately, this will be about a family and about a family that was trying to figure out how to exist. Well,
I mean, like this is definitely a major schism for us because I mean, I feel like one of the things I think is strong about the film is the balance of it. I think it's so balanced in that regard, like in the way that it goes, it manages to keep both the A and the B storyline working. And I think what works about the message of it is what the giving screen time to the characters makes the consumerism points not as heavy-handed. Like I feel like it's clear without being thrust in our throats because we're interested in these characters.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I don't agree with that. I just feel like it was handled very softly, and I feel like at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter that they had this sort of premise that had to hold them together. It was ultimately about these broken characters, not necessarily these broken consumers. It was ultimately about these two people that were trying to figure out how they felt emotionally about each other.
I mean, like that is, I think, the key to any successful movie is, I think it needs to be character-driven. You know what I mean? But within the concept itself, I think that I think that there's a lot going on. I mean, like first of all, the love story isn't really addressed at all. Like it's very small and subtle, and this is slow burn with the love story that I think that is another thing that's really successful about it. A good choice. What's that?
I think it was kind of out of the gate on that. I guess I felt like they were building to that kind of tension pretty early on. Ultimately,
what about all these scenes with Lauren Hutton and like all of the objects and like the things, the materials that they deal with throughout the movie, whether it's the jogging suit or the cars or the golf equipment. I mean, like where does that? There's tons of screen time devoted to these things. It's just wasted.
Yeah, it's wasted. Although, actually, I would say, in a lot of ways,
I mean, it's ridiculous.
In a lot of ways, it was probably the best product placement movie I've ever seen. I mean, it was.
Well, I mean, that's what makes it brilliant, I think, from an indie point of view, because I mean, it's this low-budget film, but they were to get so much awesome shit like the house and all that stuff. They got it all for free, and I think that's just brilliant producing. Christie's A, like the answer to a trivia question. It was great.
Yeah, sure. I wanted it to have more teeth. I just wanted it to be a stronger, darker film than it was.
So you wanted it to be darker, and because it had sort of a light tone, does that negate the satire? Does that negate the point because it didn't have a darkness to it?
For me,
I think that's sort of small-minded in its own way, which is not to say stupid, but it's sort of closed-minded is probably a better word because it's like satire can only. This is sort of suggest. I'm still talking.
Now I'm defending myself because you're calling me stupid and small-minded. So
I said, and then I said, no, I said closed-minded is probably a better word because what you're suggesting is that satires require a dark tone in order to function.
What I'm suggesting is that satire has to have some teeth. It has to have a point that it ends up resolving at the end of it. This wasn't that. This didn't have a resolution to that.
I don't think that's necessarily. Why would it need to have a resolution? Like to sort of.
It has to have a point about what it's satirizing. It didn't have a point about what it was satirizing.
Well, I don't know. There was a point. I think it was just. I think it was the chasing material goods to no end is the point. It's funny because
and also how material goods makes us feel about ourselves. Like like the acquisition of things. How that connects to our own self-worth.
And using material goods to try and to get love, which is what the neighbor was doing. But I have to say that I take the exact opposite view of J Money in the sense that I thought that the satire was effective, maybe a little heavy-handed, but effective. But I thought the romantic comedy aspect was just god-awful, and I had absolutely no care in the world as to whether or not they would end up together, probably because Demi Moore's character was this just horrendous, awful, irredeemable witch by the time the thing was over. And then she just turns around, and I'm supposed to be just psyched about them getting together. Like I was just like, this.
Are you sure you're not confusing Demi Moore with Lauren Hutton?
No, no, no. I mean, she's
How is she irredeemable? Like, she's a woman she has a job that she's trying to do, and she feels stressed about trying to do it well.
the horrible thing happens, and she's just like, yeah, I'm gonna run away now. And I mean,
yeah.
Duchovny is
Self-preservation is hardly is in some places a notable quality. I mean, like, and also in a moment like that, it's like it's almost like the right thing to do. Like, it's smart.
Well, I mean, from a legal defense attorney standpoint, perhaps, but
even that, I mean, like, who's right and who's wrong? Like, for him to blow the whistle on certain things, like you can argue that he was a dick there because he cares about these people and he's putting them in some jeopardy, like potentially even some legal issues.
Well, I mean, how many people? His concern is how many more people are gonna die. I mean,
I think that's a non-issue because I think what now we gave something away here, but I think that while I buy the tragic event, like I swallowed it, I don't think it was a sign of things to come. Like, I think that particular character was maybe weak and therefore a good mark. But it's not like these guys were like murderers that were like lining up, that this was going to be a constant thing that happened to them. I mean, this stealth marketing thing, obviously they had a lot of cells all over the country. So like the tragic event is an anomaly.
I mean, I don't know. I felt like Duchovny's character was the redeemable one, clearly, and then I just after.
I think that obviously the film wants you to think that. I don't know what that's all about, but I think the film wants you to think that. But I have someone at my door, strangely. All right, you know what? I'm just gonna answer it and see what happens.
Oh well. So, David,
awesome.
You thought that Demi Moore was just awful?
I'm in the middle of something.
Oh, I did.
Sorry.
I did.
You didn't feel like she was trying to, throughout the movie, sort of redeem herself, trying to figure out what she felt about her relationships in general? No. To me, both Demi Moore and David Duchovny in this movie started out, sort of lost in general, and then they ended up fighting each other.
She doesn't show any interest in him until he starts selling goods, and it looks like he's gonna.
But I mean, like, I think there's something to that as well. I think that's true. I think there's truth in that.
Well,
because when he starts, hear me out.
Okay.
I think that's human nature. Because his success leads to self-confidence, which makes one more attractive to other people. I think there's something to that. And also, I mean, like, when he was more successful and more independent, he needed her less, because he was sort of angling for her from the get-go. But once he was successful and didn't need her, I mean, I think there's truth there. I think that's the dynamic there is something that I've experienced a lot. I know Jay Money has. I know you haven't. But
I mean, also, didn't they kind of hint at the fact that she brought him in to begin with because she was sort of interested in him? I mean, she defends him against Lauren Hutton when Lauren Hutton just says, we're going to get rid of this guy. There's
something there. I mean, like, I think one of the things that we've sort of touched on, but not really, I mean, like, because we obviously disagree. It's amazing that, like, how different our responses are to this movie. I kind of love it, and we don't have much more time to talk about it, but I think that, do you deny their chemistry, though, their on-screen chemistry, Davie? I think it's palpable.
I deny the hell out of it. Yes.
Oh my God! I think that they're so good together. I mean, I think that's what gives the movie its extra heart. Like, I feel like the satire aspect of it that you and I agree with is there, and this element of it lifts it to a different level. I mean, like, I think that's why I like it so much, is I feel like it works on both levels. One person that I showed the movie to, like, I rewatched the movie when I was back in New York, and I assume some of those people are watching me now because I watched it with some people, and one person said to me, he's like, well, it was good, but like, and the love story is really good, but I felt like I was watching an infomercial, and I'm like, yes, I think that's the point. I mean, I think that speaks to the satirical aspect of it. I mean, I think. I think that is good. I think that's a success.
For me, again, I don't want to get back into this. I think it could have been a little bit stronger. I just think that they could have made it more interesting. I think they could have made that aspect of it much more interesting. Because to me, ultimately, it felt like set dressing by the end of the movie. It felt like this was a premise that they used to talk about these, romantic liaisons between these characters. And by the way, I didn't dislike this movie. Like I said to begin with, I think it's an okay movie. I think it's a fine movie. I'm just saying that I think that we disagree about the level of satire that's happening in this movie.
Well, you and I disagree on it, but Davey and I are in agreement about that. But Davey agrees.
Davey and I disagree about romance,
about the love
apparently.
story.
So.
And I mean, it's like this movie has two aspects of it. I like them both. J Money likes one, and Davey likes the other. It's so different, and I think that's fascinating to me that we responded to it in such different ways. Because I don't think J Money, you don't feel like Demi Moore was a bitch, do you?
No, actually, I thought that she seemed relatively vulnerable throughout the entire movie. I'm kind of surprised that Davey Joe had that reaction.
This is one of the more fascinating discussions that we've had. I wish we didn't have 58 seconds left. With that 58 seconds, here's my nitpicking things. One of them was the tragic moment. Like I would have handled it differently if I were in charge there. Number two is I felt like the kid's storyline, and maybe this is what you were reacting to, J Money. I felt like the kid's storyline was a little forgotten about. And Amber Heard's so freaking hot, it's ridiculous. But they both had some interesting things going on in their storylines, and they were sort of short-shrifted by the main romantic connection there. So that's sort of a minor thing. Another minor thing potentially is, I talked a little bit about the lack of cinematicness. I think that overall there was also like the cinematography was a little on the flat side, as our buzzer goes off. I feel like it was not. I mean, I don't have pictures of it, but there was light coming through windows that was blasting through, and not it was a little hot at points that it didn't.
Yeah, it felt like a small production.
And it wasn't a focus of the director. I feel like he was more interested in the blocking and the scenes and the character work, which is fine. But and that's why I called them my nitpicky things. You guys have anything on those before we go?
I mean, again, I guess it felt very video on demand to me. It felt like maybe something I would see on Lifetime, or that level of production, for instance, is what I'm saying. It
felt a little bit like television, not so much cinematic.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't disagree with that statement, but it doesn't make me like it less. Especially some of the things on television these days are, just as good as some of the things that you see in theater. We talked about that, I think, in one of our sound-offs. Okay. All right. We got to wrap it up so we can be on time for our classic movie discussion. I know you guys are excited about that. Those tend to be our more popular discussions, and man, we're going to go crazy tonight in about 5 minutes as we talk about Apocalypse Now. Talk about needing a lot of time to break down a movie. My God, my head's already spinning as it is. So with that in mind, I can tell you a little tidbit about our next indie, also from 2010, and I can tell you that the director of our next indie is a housemate with the lead actor from my feature film. So that's your tidbit leading us into next week.
Insider Hollywood knowledge right there.
That's right. I don't know how you're going to get that trivia question, but that's going to be November the 9th, probably at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, and and we'll reveal the indie closer to the date. I know what it is, but you don't. Anyway, that's our indie spotlight for the night. Classic movie discussion coming up in about 4 minutes. 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's go.